My name is Elena Hartwell. I'm 22 years old. 4 years of sleepless nights at Northwestern Business School. 4 years of cold coffee, library marathons, and choosing textbooks over parties. A 3.8 GPA that felt less like a number and more like survival. The graduation party at Riverside Country Club in Cedar Falls, Iowa, was supposed to be the reward. My parents, Harold and Margaret Hartwell, had spared no expense. White linen tablecloths, a live band tucked near the windows overlooking the golf course, grilled salmon, herb-crusted chicken, and my favorite strawberry cheesecake from Polson's Bakery. For one night, I was allowed to shine. And that was exactly the problem. Because my older sister, Brenda, has never tolerated a spotlight that didn't belong to her. Brenda is 26, beautiful in the sharp, commanding way that turns heads in a room, perpetually dramatic. Every milestone in my life has somehow doubled as a stage for her announcements. My high school graduation, she revealed her engagement. Christmas morning, a life-changing decision. There is something inside her that flinches when applause isn't meant for her. She arrived fashionably late, of course, a cream dress that hugged her figure just tightly enough to draw eyes. Her husband, Alex Donovan, walked beside her, carrying their 6-month-old son, Thomas. Alex works as a financial consultant at Henderson and Associates downtown. He's steady, measured, the kind of man who listens before speaking. Despite the tension between Brenda and me, he's always treated me kindly, like I wasn't a rival in some imaginary competition. That night, though, something was off. Brenda kept watching me. Not casually, not lovingly. Studying me. When my college roommate Sarah excitedly told people about my internship offer from Morrison Financial Group in Chicago, Brenda interrupted loudly about how exhausting motherhood was. When Aunt Carol complimented my honors distinction, Brenda chimed in about her sacrifices. I kept smiling. I kept swallowing it. This was my night. I told myself I was imagining the tension, but when Dad finished his toast, his voice thick with pride as he said, "Both my daughters have made me proud in different ways," I saw it, that flicker in Brenda's eyes. She stood up slowly, wineglass raised, smile too tight. "I have something to say about Elena." The room fell quiet. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I had seen that look before, and suddenly I knew. This wasn't going to be a toast. This was going to be a detonation. Brenda didn't rush. That was the cruelest part. She stood there with her wineglass lifted slightly, letting the silence stretch, until every fork paused mid-air and every whispered side conversation dissolved. The band near the windows stopped adjusting their instruments. Even baby Thomas, who had been fussing moments earlier, went still in Alex's arms. "I think," Brenda began, her voice dipped in artificial sweetness, "that everyone deserves to know what kind of person we're really celebrating tonight." My pulse thudded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I felt Sarah stiffen beside me. Brenda tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on me. "A few months ago, when I was 6 months pregnant with Thomas, Elena decided to make her move on my husband." The words didn't register at first. It was like someone had spoken in a foreign language. Then the collective gasp hit me like a physical shove. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward me in disbelief. Conversations rippled outward in horrified whispers. "She started texting Alex," Brenda continued, gaining confidence as she watched the shock spread. "Inappropriate messages, trying to seduce him while I was carrying his child." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the room had shrunk, like the walls of Riverside Country Club were folding inward around me. "That's absolutely insane!" Sarah shot to her feet. "Elena would never do that. Brenda, what is wrong with you?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brenda pressed forward. "Can you imagine? Your own sister, trying to destroy your marriage while you're pregnant? She's always been jealous. She can't stand not being the center of attention." "Jealous?" The accusation was so backwards it almost made me dizzy. Dad's voice cut sharply through the room. "Brenda, you need to be very careful about what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," she said, her lower lip trembling just enough to sell the performance. "I have messages." All eyes turned to Alex. That was when something shifted. While the rest of us were unraveling, Alex looked calm. Not furious, not confused. Calm. He gently adjusted Thomas in his arms and then placed the baby carrier onto a nearby chair. His movements were steady, deliberate. "Brenda," he said quietly, touching her elbow, "I think you need to sit down." "Don't you Brenda me," she snapped, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Tell them about what she sent you. Alex's expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. You really want to do this? Here? Yes, she insisted, voice cracking slightly. I want everyone to know who Elena really is. My heartbeat felt like it was rattling inside my ribs. I scanned the faces in the room. Family friends, college buddies who had driven from Chicago and Minneapolis, aunts and uncles who had known me since childhood. All staring, waiting. Alex walked slowly toward the microphone my father had set up for speeches. The quiet was suffocating. Outside, through the tall windows, I could hear cicadas humming in the Iowa night. Since Brenda wants to share truths tonight, Alex said into the mic, his voice clear and steady. Let's do that. Brenda's fingers tightened around her glass. Elena sent me exactly one message 3 months ago. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. One message, he repeated. She asked if I could give her advice about entering the financial consulting field after graduation. Brenda's face drained of color. It was completely professional, Alex continued. I showed it to Brenda because I thought she'd be proud that her sister respected my opinion enough to ask for career guidance. I felt the air rush back into my lungs. But instead, he said slowly, turning to look at his wife, she turned it into something else. Alex, don't, Brenda whispered, panic beginning to leak through her composure. I have the message right here, he added, holding up his phone. It says, Hey Alex, would you mind sharing how you transitioned into consulting? I'd love your perspective before interviews. That's it. Silence. Thick and heavy. The tide was turning. I could feel it, like a wave pulling back before it crashes. Brenda swayed slightly. That's not the point, she tried weakly. It was the tone. There was no tone, Alex interrupted, not raising his voice, but somehow commanding the entire room. You created one. He looked around at everyone. My parents, our extended family, my friends. And since we're apparently airing out grievances in public, he said carefully, I think it's only fair that we don't cherry-pick which truths we tell. The room went still again. Brenda's knuckles were white around her glass now. Alex, she said under her breath, barely audible but desperate. Not here. He met her eyes. Why not here? He asked softly. You chose here. A chill ran down my spine. Whatever was about to happen, this wasn't over. Not even close. Since we're sharing truths tonight, Alex said into the microphone, his voice steady, but layered with something deeper. Pain, maybe. Let me tell you what really happened. Brenda's breathing quickened, and for the first time that evening, I saw fear in her eyes. Alex didn't look at me when he spoke next. He looked at Brenda. I was going to wait, he said, voice low but steady. I was going to wait until after Elena's graduation. Because unlike you, I actually care about not destroying important moments. The words landed like stones. Brenda's lips parted. Alex, please. 3 weeks ago, he continued, I went with Brenda to her office holiday party. A murmur rippled through the room. I watched her interact with her coworker, Brandon Mitchell from marketing. They were comfortable. That doesn't mean anything, Brenda snapped, but the sharpness in her voice had cracked. You're right, Alex said evenly. It didn't. Not at first. He slid his phone back into his pocket, but his hand stayed there, like it needed something to anchor to. But then there were late-night calls, weekend overtime, meetings her boss knew nothing about. I felt like I was watching a slow-motion train wreck. People leaned forward in their chairs. My Aunt Carol covered her mouth with her hand. And then, Alex said, his voice tightening slightly, I did something I never thought I would do. I looked through her phone. The silence was suffocating. I found months of messages between Brenda and Brandon, explicit messages, dating back 8 months. 8 months. My brain did the math automatically. Thomas was 6 months old. Brenda's mascara began to smear as tears spilled down her cheeks. You had no right. 8 months, Alex repeated, louder now. You were already pregnant when it started. Gasps, sharp intakes of breath. Oh my God, Aunt Carol whispered. Brenda shook her head wildly. It wasn't like that. There's more, Alex said, and somehow his voice dropping softer made it more terrifying. He turned slightly, scanning the room, not for sympathy, but for witnesses. Yesterday, I got the results of the paternity test. The air in the room disappeared. I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears again, but this time not from humiliation, from shock. Thomas, Alex said carefully, each word deliberate, is not my son. The sentence hung there, unreal. The baby carrier creaked slightly as Thomas shifted inside, oblivious. Brenda's sob broke the silence like glass shattering. No, she cried. No, Alex, we can talk about this at home, not here. Home? Alex's voice cracked for the first time. 6 months of me talking to your stomach, buying crib furniture, practicing holding him so I wouldn't drop him. 6 months of believing I was going to be a father. My father slowly lowered himself into a chair, as if his knees couldn't hold him anymore. I didn't know, he muttered faintly. I swear to God, I didn't know. Neither did I, Alex replied, not until the pieces stopped fitting. He looked at me then, and something inside me twisted. And I'm sorry, Elena, he said. I'm sorry she tried to make you the villain, when she's been tearing this family apart herself. The room felt tilted, like gravity had shifted and none of us knew which way was down. Brenda had collapsed into her chair now, sobbing openly. Her wineglass lay tipped over on the table, red liquid bleeding into the white linen cloth like a stain that would never come out. And I stood there, frozen. My humiliation had evaporated, replaced by something hotter, denser. For years, I had swallowed every slight, every interruption, every backhanded compliment. Be the mature one, Mom would say. Keep the peace, Dad would add. And I did. At Christmas, when Brenda announced her engagement before dessert. At my high school graduation, when she hijacked my speech to flash her ring. At every family gathering where somehow, inevitably, the narrative bent toward her. I swallowed it all. But tonight she had tried to destroy me. In front of 50 people. To save herself. Something snapped. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was quiet. A thin thread pulling too tight. I stood up so fast my chair crashed backward onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the country club like a gunshot. Every head turned toward me. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel self-conscious. I felt volcanic. Are you kidding me? My voice came out rough, unrecognizable. Brenda looked up at me through streaked mascara. You cheated on your husband for 8 months, I said, stepping toward her slowly. You let him believe that baby was his. You let him fall in love with a child that isn't even his. Elena, don't, Mom whispered. And when your lies started collapsing, I continued, barely hearing her, you tried to drag me down with you. Brenda shook her head weakly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I could feel my hands trembling. For 22 years, I said, my voice rising, I've let you steal every moment that mattered to me. Every milestone, every achievement. Dad stood up abruptly. Girls, this is enough. No, I snapped, not even looking at him. I'm done being quiet. The words poured out of me, years of restraint dissolving. Business school wasn't easy, Brenda. I worked for this. I earned this. And you couldn't let me have one night. Her expression shifted, from shame to something uglier. This is your fault anyway, she hissed suddenly. If you hadn't been born, maybe Mom and Dad would have loved me enough. The sentence hit harder than the accusation earlier. It was naked, ugly, honest, and it obliterated whatever restraint I had left. I took one step closer. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. She laughed bitterly through tears. This is Mom and Dad's party, not yours. The red haze descended. Before I consciously decided to move, my hand flew. The crack of the slap echoed through the room. Her head snapped to the side. Her glasses skidded across the floor. Gasps, shouting, chairs scraping. But I barely heard any of it. Because in that split second, in the aftermath of the sound, I knew something irreversible had just happened. And there was no going back. The silence after the slap lasted less than a second. Then everything detonated. Brenda's hand flew to her cheek, eyes wide with shock. Not just pain, but disbelief that I had finally done something unpredictable. Her glasses lay crooked on the floor, one lens cracked. She attacked me, she shrieked, voice hysterical. Did everyone see that? She assaulted me. But I wasn't done. 22 years of swallowing resentment surged through me like a flood breaking a dam. I lunged forward again, but Sarah grabbed my arm from one side while my cousin Jake caught the other. Elena, stop, Sarah hissed in my ear. You ruined everything, I shouted at Brenda, struggling against their grip. All you had to do was let me have one day. One day. Mom was crying openly now. Dad was shouting something I couldn't process. Half the guests were on their feet, unsure whether to intervene or escape. Brenda's mascara streaked down her face as she sobbed dramatically, but even through the tears, I could see calculation flicker behind her eyes. After what you did, you're lucky that's all she did, Alex said coldly. His voice cut through the chaos like ice water. He picked up his keys from the table. Harold, Margaret, he said, looking at my parents with quiet devastation. I'm sorry your celebration was destroyed. Then he looked at me. Congratulations, Elena, you deserve better. And just like that, he walked out. He left his wife, he left the party, he left behind the child he had believed was his son. The room began to empty in fragments. Awkward apologies, mumbled goodbyes. The untouched strawberry cheesecake sat on the dessert table like a symbol of something pure that had been contaminated. Within 20 minutes, the Riverside Country Club looked like a battlefield after retreat. It was just us. Mom, Dad, Brenda, still sniffling, Thomas crying softly in his carrier, and me, shaking from adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to grief. Both of you, Dad said finally, his voice low and tight. In the car. Now. The drive home was suffocating. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the quiet streets of Cedar Falls. The same streets I'd grown up on. The same houses where neighbors would now whisper about what they'd seen. Brenda rode shotgun, occasionally sniffling, but silent. Once inside our childhood living room, Dad turned to face us. I have never been more embarrassed in my life, he began. There it was. Embarrassed. Not devastated. Not betrayed. Embarrassed. Milena, he caught himself. Elena, I know you were provoked, but that behavior was unacceptable. She tried to destroy me, I said quietly. I don't care what she tried to do, he exploded. You put your hands on your sister in front of 50 people. You acted like some kind of savage. The word hit me harder than the slap. Mom wiped her eyes. How are we supposed to face anyone after tonight? A cold realization settled into my chest. They were more worried about the town talking than about what Brenda had done. So this is my fault? I asked softly. No one said that, Mom murmured weakly. But they had. In everything except the exact words. 3 days followed, where the house felt like a mausoleum. Mom and Dad barely spoke to me. When they did, their tone carried that quiet disappointment that makes you feel like you've failed an invisible test. Brenda disappeared to her friend Chloe's apartment across town, taking Thomas with her. The silence in the house was eerie without her dramatic presence. By Thursday, I couldn't stand it anymore. We need to talk, I said, standing in the living room, while Dad pretended to read the Cedar Falls Gazette, and Mom dusted the mantle that didn't need dusting. Mel, Elena, Mom sighed. What's done is done. No, I said firmly, it's not. I sat across from them, hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. For 22 years, I've watched Brenda manipulate every family event. I've swallowed it because you asked me to keep the peace. Dad lowered his newspaper. She has her struggles, he said carefully. Her struggles? I let out a short, humorless laugh. She cheated on her husband for 8 months. She lied about the paternity of her baby, and when her life started collapsing, she tried to burn mine down with it. Mom looked stricken. And you're angry at me because I finally defended myself? You physically attacked her, Dad insisted. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes. After years of emotional attacks that you both ignored. The room went very still. I'm not proud of slapping her, I continued, voice steadier now. But I am not apologizing for standing up for myself. Dad's jaw tightened. So here's what happens next, I said. They both looked at me. Either we acknowledge that Brenda's behavior has been toxic and destructive for years, or I'm done. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. You're serious? Dad asked quietly. Dead serious. Silence stretched. Mom sank into the couch. We never meant for things to get this bad. But they did, I said gently, and pretending everything was fine just made it worse. Dad exhaled slowly. Your sister called this morning, he said. Alex filed for divorce. He told her to leave. I swallowed. She wants to move back home. The air thickened again. And? I asked. Dad looked at Mom before answering. We told her we needed to speak to you first. For the first time in my life, they hadn't automatically chosen her comfort over mine. And that shift, subtle but seismic, told me something fundamental had changed. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my apartment in Chicago, watching the gray-blue stretch of Lake Michigan ripple under a cold November sky. The silence here is different. It's not suffocating. It's earned. That Thursday afternoon, the day my parents said they needed to talk to me first before letting Brenda move back in, became the pivot point none of us saw coming. I expected them to fold. I expected the familiar script. She's your sister. She has nowhere else to go. Family comes first. Instead, Mom twisted her wedding ring nervously and said something I had never heard before. Maybe we made it too easy for her. Dad nodded slowly. We kept cushioning her falls. It wasn't a dramatic apology. There were no grand confessions. But it was acknowledgement, and that mattered. We worked out conditions. Brenda could move home temporarily, but only if she got a job within 30 days. She had to contribute to bills. She had to attend therapy with Dr. Patricia Williams downtown. And most importantly, she had to call every single person who attended my graduation party and admit she fabricated the story about me. When Dad told her the terms, she screamed at first. Then she cried. Then she agreed. Consequences, it turns out, are louder than tantrums. The apology tour was excruciating. I overheard some of the calls, her voice shaky but controlled. I lied about Elena. She never texted Alex anything inappropriate. Some people forgave her politely. Others were colder. Cedar Falls is small. Reputations linger. At Henderson and Associates, things were even more complicated. Both Alex and Brandon Mitchell still worked there. Brandon transferred to their Kansas City branch within 2 months. Alex stayed. And here's the part no one expected. Despite the paternity results, Alex didn't disappear from Thomas's life. He told me later during a quiet phone call, "I won't punish a child for adult mistakes." There was no bitterness in his tone, just sadness and something steady. He helped with childcare when Brenda started working at Patterson Insurance Agency. Watching him choose decency, even after humiliation, shifted something in me. Brenda and I, we are civil. We can exist in the same room without detonating. But closeness? That's gone. Trust doesn't regenerate overnight. Sometimes it doesn't regenerate at all. 2 months after I moved to Chicago, my phone rang. "Alex, I heard you're still interested in consulting," he said. I hesitated. "I am. Henderson and Associates is opening a Chicago branch. We need someone with a business background who understands ethics." The irony hung between us. Ethics. After everything. "You'd be perfect," he added quietly. I started a month later. Now, at 23, I have my own apartment, my own salary, my own quiet mornings with coffee that tastes better because no one is competing with me for attention. Sometimes I think about that night at Riverside Country Club. The slap. The sound of it. The shock on Brenda's face. It was wrong. I know that now. Violence doesn't erase pain. But standing up for myself? That wasn't wrong. For the first time in my life, I stopped managing someone else's emotions. I stopped shrinking to make space for her storms. Brenda is still dramatic, still fragile in ways she refuses to admit. Therapy hasn't transformed her into a saint. But now, when she crosses lines, there are boundaries. And consequences. Mom and Dad are different too. Careful, more honest, less afraid of discomfort. We don't pretend anymore. Sometimes family isn't destroyed in one explosive night. Sometimes it's reassembled differently, with cracks visible, with pieces rearranged, but stronger at the joints that were once ignored. From my window, the city lights flicker on one by one as dusk settles over the lake. Chicago doesn't know me as Brenda's sister. Here, I'm just Elena Hartwell, consultant, graduate, woman who survived her own public crucifixion and walked out with her spine intact. Sometimes the family you build, through boundaries, through chosen loyalty, through self-respect, is healthier than the one you were born into. And that makes all the difference.